Hello everyone, welcome. I was thinking today about what I was going to say, and I looked at my YouTube video I was just scrolling about, and I came across a graduation ceremony. I don't know why, perhaps I do, why YouTube feeds me these things, but a graduation ceremony from a school in America, a traditional Catholic school. And I was watching it a little bit, but I was pottering around, and I put my headphones on, and it was a concert and so on. At the very beginning, I just thought it was your usual graduation ceremony. And but then, as I was pottering about and I was listening to it with my headphones, I came across something that actually made me look at it and sit down and actually watch it. It was nothing extraordinary or special, but it was something that in what was happening there, the demeanor of it's a traditional Catholic school. The demeanor of the nuns and of the students took me back. Most of you, certainly those who subscribe, know my history by now. But it took me back to my early days with nuns, and so I'm going to share with you my reactions to it, because I identified with it completely. I knew what was happening. I knew what was out there for you to see and what was sort of behind the scenes, as it were. And I identified several things. First of all, the demeanor. How the students and the nuns and the teachers would walk up to the stage and so on. Demeanor is something that, if you have been educated by nuns, you recognize immediately. In Spain, until about, I would say, 20 or 30 years ago, we could identify just by looking at people. I'm not insane, you're not going to believe this, but honestly, we could identify those who had been educated by nuns. This is not strange. For example, in England, for example, people can identify just for, the accent, which social class you belong to, less and less these days, but you could identify. And it wasn't only the way you spoke, but the way you, even the way you walk, the way you conducted yourself. I'm reminded of a German friend of mine who is Jewish, and he told me that his grandparents, his grandfather one day was at a train station somewhere in Germany, and there were some military officers there with different uniforms and different stars and things, and he could identify just by the way they walked, and to a large extent the way they talked, but just the way they walked and the way that they conducted themselves, which office they represented. This is something that in sort of more traditional societies you could very easily identify. They didn't need to say, I am of this class or I am of this regiment or something. You could just see it. And excuse me, let me just drink a little bit of water. And in my country of birth, I can assure you that you could identify immediately, especially women, those who had been brought up and educated by nuns, even before they spoke. Now, how was that, you may wonder? Well, there was something about it, and I think it was this, that they they never encourage you to stand out before all others. In other words, they always used to say that it was always the less capable or the less ignorant who always place themselves on the front row. There is always this reluctance to shine above everybody else, but that doesn't go to ambition of what you want to do. It's just that the emphasis is on the group. In other words, instead of just being the flower at the top, the beautiful rose, concentrate on the root of the plant. And so, in other words, you're going to help the group there at the root, not as the flowering, as it were. So there is always a certain demeanor of the strength is in the root, not in the flower at the top. I don't know whether I'm explaining this. So you never portray yourself. It's seen as, to a certain extent, actually quite vulgar to display yourself in that manner. So I was watching this and I was recognizing certain things, the way they walked and so on. Now, the nuns, for example, who are playing or conducting will never, for example, take a vow to the audience. The parents were there. It is nothing about, it's not about them. They do not actually want that would mean that they want the applause for themselves, or they will even recognize the applause, something of themselves. No, it's always going to be the group. I noticed something also, that the way the students walked. This is something also that nuns, their education of children, are very place a lot of emphasis on. You never run. You run outside. You run in the recreation room. But in the building, out of respect for being a place of education, of formation and so on, you never run, you always walk. They would teach us how to go up the stairs and come down the stairs without running. Why is this thing about running? Well, that would mean that if you're running and bumping into anything, perhaps you're late. That means that you haven't prepared yourself and so on. So there is a way of walking peacefully, which means at the same time self-control, being in charge of yourself. Running about and bumping about, that means that you're not. You can see it very clearly in how these kids in this graduation ceremony, I could see it. The other thing is that they had the little ones and the bigger ones and the adolescents, the teenagers, and a few who graduated that year. And in their concert performance, everyone, the children, the little ones and the big ones, were all part of the same concert according to their age and their ability, I suppose, but all of them take part. So you see little kiddies who are perhaps 5 or 6 or 7 years old, and they come in 2s or 3s and they recite a little poem, the 3 of them. The reaction from the nuns is not, oh, look, how cute, and they nice, this little kid is reciting a poem. Never that. You're not going to see them smiling. It's not about being cute. The parents, I'm sure, their parents were sitting at the back saying, oh, but from the educators is nothing about cuteness. That has nothing to do with it. In other words, if you are 6 or 7, they give you a responsibility, and that you have to do to the best of your ability. They're not going to ask you to play the piano in a concert or something, but it is that little poem that you have to learn, and you have to rehearse, and you have to deliver it. And I also notice how, because we used to do the same, and they give you poems to learn and you have to recite them, but of course enunciation is very important. The pause is very important. You have to rehearse and rehearse. It's not just saying the poem, is saying it with a certain deliverance. And I could see this in these little ones, that they rehearsed and rehearsed. Believe me, in this these rehearsals will start at the beginning of the year. And I remember we always had this, we used to call it comedies or soirees or something, but plays, theater plays or singing or whatever, and every single day you would have to rehearse for an hour. So everything had to be perfect obviously by the day that you're supposed to perform. But each single student, however young, has to do his or her bit. Okay, so I'm going to put the link below, because it's fascinating just to watch what is not obvious, but is very much there. So a 6-year-old has his or her responsibility. It's not about being cute, it's about doing it right. The others, the older ones, will have to do more difficult things, but you have to do yours. There's also, we're talking here about not just education of, curricula, but formation of character. And this goes to responsibility, to discipline, to self-control, to duty. This is what it is expected of you. This is what you have to do to the best of your ability. About the deliverance of the poems, very important to speak clearly. I remember when we were learning how to read, and you're talking about 5, 6, 7, okay? We had to learn to read out loud, not just to ourselves, but out loud, to recite, yes. And they had it was like a little castanet or something, I don't know what it was, it made the noise. And so you would start reading, and at every comma they would play it, and you had to pause. So you would have to read, "The other day, as I was walking along the garden," pause, and so on. So they teach you how to recite, as it were, but at the same time how to speak properly. What else? At the end there are. So I was thinking while I was watching all this, the thing that I could see very clearly was discipline, discipline, discipline. That is what I was seeing all along. So I would encourage you. This is about a traditional Catholic school, but I would encourage you that when you visit schools, you look for these little things that tell you discipline or lack of discipline, because through discipline of children, they're going to learn much, much more than if you just let them do whatever they want. It's not just simply following rules, the obvious rules. It's how you the self-control, the inner discipline that you display in all your acts, and that is going to serve them well in the future. Then I was going to, it was just a little concert, so I was just going to switch it off when I see the graduation address by a bishop, which was a traditional one, which I was quite surprised, and it was a young bishop, and was talking about very traditional understanding of education and formation, and I was pleasantly surprised, actually. So I hope you watch it. But even more so, there is a short speech by one of the graduates, and he's talking about what I have learned, thank you to everybody and so on, and what he had, the main things that he had learned. And I was pleasantly surprised that he said discipline. That because of this discipline, which as a student sometimes is very hard, but discipline in the little things, how much he had learned. He goes on and explains different things that happened and so on. It was rather moving. If you watch it, watch the last speech by this graduate student, an adolescent. And he's quite moving, actually, because he says that his parents were looking for a good traditional Catholic school, and it was where they lived, it was hard to find. They finally found this school, but the problem was that they live very far away. So his parents sold their house, bought a house near the school so that their child could go there. And that meant, he says, that his father would have to drive to work, to his place of work, in traffic for an hour, and that is if he left home before 6 o'clock in the morning. And then he would have to come back perhaps for 2 hours in traffic again. So he's talking about the recognition of his father and his parents' sacrifice to inner denial, their sacrifice about moving to this place so that he could go to this school. It's actually quite moving. So I'm just going to leave it there, but I wanted to share it with you because it seems that in the United States I'm seeing lots of horrifying things, obviously, but I'm also seeing very good things happening, hopeful things. In different places in the United States that I don't think are happening in Europe. So we have in the United States, I'm very hopeful, really, because we have to put it in some way, the worst and the best. And I have said many times regarding traditional Catholicism that I feel that the rebirth of the church, as it were, is going to come to where the church is most abused too, and that is the United States. So I watched this, and then as I was going to switch it off, I see in one of the comments, one of those horrible comments that one always gets, saying this is an anti-church, and the devil himself, all kinds of terrible things. And but what caught my attention, I read it, what caught my attention is that it says that since Jesus saved us all with his sacrifice, therefore none of us need to do anything else. In other words, we are denying the sacrifice of Jesus, if we do anything, all this church, he calls it the anti-church and so on. That's quite amazing. To this denial of free will. Yes, Jesus, in order to give us a chance, but then we have free will to follow him or not to follow him, to suggest that we don't have, Jesus died for us on the cross and now we don't have to do anything. That even defies not only religion but logic. I don't know, but it's so full of hatred, perhaps. It's just not saying, you are all wrong. It's a sort of, I think it portrays self-hatred, really, and project it onto others. So the best thing is, I always ignore them. If there is in my channel one like that, I just delete it. I don't want to deal with toxic things. When I see that there is malice behind it, when I see that there is a difference of opinion or whatever, that's fine. We can, but when there is malice and hatred behind it, I think it's just better delete it and not even deal with it, because I think they feed on that. So anyway, that is, I'm going to perhaps do another video this evening, but that is all for the moment. I just wanted to share this with you. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.